How's it going, everybody? My name is Zach. I am the head building monkey here at the AK Guy Inc., and I wanted to show you the Kami Tommy in a little bit more detail. Now, if you don't know, the Kami Tommy came out of a series of videos that my friend and employer Brandon does called Cursed Gun Images, where he finds pictures of guns on the internet that are photoshopped, just hideous and wrong, and that sort of thing. And someone made a gun looking exactly like this as a Photoshop a while ago. And as a challenge, Brandon wanted to build one in real life. So this is what came out of it. One of the first things you might notice about this gun is the furniture. So this stuff was custom made for me by Kalashnikarver Customs. He did a great job on this, and they are one of a kind. Extremely close to the original Photoshop picture, which again was the goal. Only a few little changes. The Photoshop picture had this weird sharp nub missing or sticking off down here, which is just stupid, so that's fixed. And then the comb, which is where you put your cheek on the stock, the comb was like a really weird shape in the Photoshop, probably wouldn't have been very usable. So Kalashnikarver dropped it a little and made it closer to AKM spec, and this is very nice. It works great. All right, so I figure we will be doing a pretty in-depth breakdown of the mods and general build I did on this thing, but let's start with the basics. So right off the bat, this is chambered in 7.62 by 25 Takorev, little bottleneck Soviet cartridge, and it feeds from PPSH 41 drums. In theory, it should also be able to fit the stick magazines, but I don't have any, so there's that. And for comparison's sake, if you're unfamiliar, that is 7.62 Takorev on the left and 9mm on the right. It's just bottleneck, 30 caliber, pretty spicy cartridge. I like it a lot. All right, moving on. This uses a direct blowback method of operation, which means that there is nothing locking the bolt shut when you fire the cartridge. The only thing that keeps it shut and keeps it from exploding under pressurized gas is the mass of the bolt carrier group. That topic has been covered a good bit. There's a ton of information out there online, but that's just the basic idea if you're unfamiliar. So let's pop the top cover off, which I always forget. I had to add this little flange there and it gets stuck. I'll go over that later. Here's the direct blowback bolt assembly here. And this is from a standard AKM, Hungarian to be specific, but it doesn't really matter. And so right off the bat, you can see a good bit of differences, and we will start with the bolt. So on a normal AKM, you have a bolt, you got two locking lugs, one on either side there, and you have a helical groove here. So what this does is, the bolt rides in the gun, hits a little spot which kicks this over, rotates, and locks into your front trunnion, which is that piece up there. So there you go. Locks up, locks shut, and those two lugs engaging is what keeps the bolt shut and locked in the gun, contains the pressure. Pretty familiar concept, like almost every semi-auto rifle nowadays does that, but important context to explain why this is so weird. So on this one, how it works is in the gun, these all ride together, kind of as though they were one piece. It does have a little slop. It's intended to act more as one piece. So what we've got here is that same bolt as the standard AKM, but it's been modified for direct blowback. So the main mod that is the most obvious here is this big section back here. So what I did was I took a piece of bar stock and bored a hole in it, pressed it on here, welded the seams, and then cut the profiles on the side and up here to match the existing profiles in there so that it fits in the rails of the receiver and fits into the front trunnion and all that. So I sleeved the bolt face smaller. You can see the diameter on the right on this one is a good bit smaller. And that is to allow for the smaller rim of 7.62 Takorev. So if we hold up 7.62 by 39, the original caliber, next to the new one, Takorev, see they're a good bit smaller. One of the cool things about 7.62 Takorev and just the family of subgun cartridges So they share the same rim diameter with 545 by 39. So a lot of builders, when they hear about sleeving the bolt face and all that, one of the first things they ask is why not just use an AK-74 bolt, because it's already the correct diameter. You don't have to worry about welding it in and recutting it, keeping it all nice and concentric. And the answer to that is that AK-74 bolts are really expensive, and we have a bucket full of AKM bolts that Bubba got his hands on and ruined. So, pretty easy choice to, use an hour or two of labor to use this rather than waste a $300 or $400 AK-74 bolt that is irreplaceable. Okay, so the other main modification for direct blowback, you probably already noticed, is that the bolt just rotates out the side here in this new groove. Now, please don't judge me too hard for that cut. It's pretty heinous. I don't have a rotary head for our milling machine, so what I did is I held it in the V-block, plunged with the end mill a little, rotated, plunged a little, rotate, plunge, and finished it with the Dremel. This isn't going to a customer or anything, it just has to work. So, you get a little ghetto with it sometimes. This new sleeve here, hopefully you're able to see what it does now, is when you fire, the pressure of the cartridge presses rearwards, which presses that onto the carrier and accelerates the whole group together as though it were one piece, which is exactly how, like the 9mm AK, the Vityaz, here in the US, the KP9, that's exactly how that works. They just machine it as one piece instead of this kind of ghetto home build type stuff. So again, for comparison, there's the AKM. It disassembles out the back there. And I'll show you. You can see the new slot up front there. Next piece that is a little less important, but still important, is the new gas piston. So gas piston is not necessarily what this is doing anymore. This is just here to add extra mass to the carrier. Generally speaking, with direct blowback, you want a heavy bolt carrier group, because again, that mass is what's keeping the chamber shut for longer, which leads to less violent operation, etc. So you add a little bit more mass up here because it's got the space in the gas tube. It's not doing anything, so might as well. The next part, and probably most important, is the magwell modifications here. In general, to be short, I used the PPS 43 feed geometry, and I 3D modeled all this to try and get an idea of how it would feed before, modifying expensive parts. It works pretty well. It is a little aggressive on the feeding angle if you have some poor quality ammunition that doesn't hold the bullet in the casing very tight. It does get some bullet setback, which we experienced in the test fires. But again, I have to say this is mostly a toy for YouTube. It's not supposed to be the world's most reliable thing, so I didn't have a ton of time to go through and figure out all the little gremlins and stuff. So those of you who have been in the building game for a while might recognize this. This is a 2XTM magwell adapter. Back in the day, people used to use these to convert AKs to 7.62 Takorev, or like a 9mm with a Suomi drum. I managed to track one of these down from a nice gentleman on Weapons Guild who lent it to me. And unfortunately, long story short, this is really not a good design. To keep it short, the distance where the magazine needs to sit, the round leaves the magazine, jumps, just kind of floats in space for a while, and then hopefully finds its way into the chamber, which generally is not a good design. You want the round to be pretty close to the chamber. There's a lot more to it than just that, but this just has to go way too far, and it needed too many modifications to fix it. So I basically scrapped this and designed a new magwell mod that my friend Ryan at Yankovic Armament laser cut and then bent this ramp for me out of sheet metal. So thank you again for that, Ryan. And then I cut this feed ramp in there. If we pick up the rifle here, now my lighting's kind of poor. There you go. You can see that sitting in there. And hopefully this will focus a little. There you go. You can see the feed ramp ends just about at the chamber. And this feeds pretty reliably. There was one pretty big oversight I made when designing this magwell though. See at the back of this 2XTM, there's this long channel here, long channel at the back of the magazine, and they slide together, and that's what keeps the magazine from rocking side to side. You can see I have just this little baby tab, which does basically nothing. To be frank, I'm not really sure how I did that, but I had to fix it. So you can, if it'll focus, there you go. You can see I had to weld on 2 tabs down here to do the same thing and remachine them in the gun. You can also see those 2 little weld beads down there where I cut the magwell too wide. I had to put 2 tacks back in to get it nice and tight. Another part of the magwell here is that I used a virgin magazine catch like trigger guard so that I could drill the hole a little bit higher, because the magazine catch on an AK, if you put it in the same spot as normal, is a little too short to catch the PPSH drum. So my hopes were to use this virgin mag catch riveted on there and then drill the hole a little higher so I wouldn't have to weld and extend this mag catch. Well, you know, that would have been nice, but my math was wrong. I drilled the hole too low, and so you can kind of see the crude welding up in there. And you can see I had to notch the mag catch to fit in between these narrow lips there. There's normal mag catch. So it's really ghetto, but it works. Not my proudest moment. Now that we're done talking about the feeding stuff, moving forward, we have just a standard AKM rear sight block. We have a short gas tube here to closer match the picture, which I think is almost spot on. And then you got this ugly little thing. This is a homemade combo block, because that's what the guy in the Photoshop used. What exactly is a combo block? You know, it's short for combination block, in case that wasn't obvious. And what it is you take the gas block and the front sight block and you smash them together. For reference, here's a standard Romanian AKM that's on the workbench. You can see gas block, front sight block shoved together. To help me out with making the combo block, I made this quick little jig made out of some barrel stubs and a piece of scrap, where you put your gas block on there, you chop your combo block, and that is a tight fit. You gotta hammer it on, but the sight block goes on there, you slide them until they're flush, and it holds these 2 at the correct distance apart so that your height of your front sight is still correct, so your sights are still functional, and it holds it nice and straight for you. Unfortunately, I got a little ahead of myself, and these 2 components here are a little spun. They're kind of like that, you know, just a little, but enough that I had to kick this block over to the right a bit to compensate. Little stuff like that kind of happens when you're kind of rushing out a build for content rather than, you know, trying to be an actual craftsman or something. So moving forward, we have a reproduction Thompson cuts compensator. You can kind of see my spacer here, which is a thread adapter. This barrel is actually threaded 14x1 left hand, aka the standard threads on an AK. I made the adapter and have the cuts compensator torqued on there, you know, again, so it matches the Photoshop. Which reminds me, I made this barrel from a barrel blank, which is just a big, giant cylinder of steel with a rifled hole in it. So, you know, you have to put a chamber in it and cut all the dimensions down, you know, do some milling operations for stuff like the handguard retainer and extractor cut and all that, which takes forever, and I hate doing it, but it's not like you can just buy one of these barrels, so just part of the build process. Well, that's all of the major components covered, so let's go over some of the miscellaneous stuff, like the dust cover. So this is just a Hungarian dust cover we had laying around that was screwed up. Bubba chopped it when he built it instead of putting the parts together properly. So this is a little short on the gun, but whatever, it's a YouTube toy. So what I had to do here was I used another Bubba dust cover and cut a chunk off and welded it on the front here, because on a normal AKM, this bolt carrier goes farther forward and covers all this, and, you know, big open gap on the side of the gun is just disgusting. So, you know, had to improvise a little. For comparison, here's a Vitesse. See, it's got the flare coming down in the same way because of the same issue, I guess, that the barrel sticks a little too far back. So there you go. got a flare there. Got a flare there. Okay, what else is there? The trigger guard here is off of a old Saiga sporter rifle. You can see the mag catch here is just a normal mag catch like the one I showed before. Just has the back end cut off. What else is there? Oh yeah, did I mention it's a machine gun? Got the happy little third pin there. So you can hear that click as it goes into battery. That's the auto sear tripping and letting the hammer fall, which makes this fairly safe as far as direct blowback machine guns go. Usually direct blowbacks in a machine gun have a fixed firing pin, which means it fires as soon as the bolt closes. That can lead to some safety issues, so having it hammer fired, closed bolt, makes this a little safer, which is pretty cool. So how a full auto AK works is, first you need lighting to show people what you're talking about. You have a little sear down in here, there, that holds your hammer down until you hit it. You can see that right there. The bolt carrier comes forward and hits that sear, which pops that out of the way and lets the hammer fall if the trigger is pulled. So one of the issues we had to deal with here is that our carrier does not go as far forward as it normally does. You know, it stops about there. On an AKM, the bolt, you know, rotates out of the way and the carrier stops up there. So I had to move the auto sear trip back. You can see where it originally was, and the back of the carrier has been cut off a bit because we don't need the carrier tail anymore. And this welding is absolutely horrendous. I was very frustrated at the end of the day and wanted to just go test fire it, so I just globbed that garbage on there, and it works, and it served its purpose in making a video, so that's how it's going to stay. While we're on the topic of me bashing my own work, you see these rivets here are just flat on this side. I was squishing them, and they were not playing nice because I like to use screwed up parts for builds like this, so the holes in this trunnion were a little too big. The rivets are kicking over sideways, not wanting to make proper heads. So I said, screw it, and just smashed them flat. Which is, you know, not textbook wrong or anything. They're still good rivets. They're still going to hold just fine. The holes are, you know, properly dimpled and everything. It's just, you know, a little unsightly. I like to not do that. You know, the AK-100 series of rifles, the Russian rifles, they all do that nowadays just because it's faster. It just looks weird. I try to avoid it. While we're on the topic of things that didn't work, I'm going to talk about my first attempt at making the bolt carrier group for this gun. So, long story short, I cut a notch in the cam groove here and cut this lug down to fit inside that notch. Standard AK bolt for reference. You can see how much thinner that is to fit in that slot. And how it worked was, if I can install it, there you go. How it worked was, this just slid freely in there, and it's a little sticky now because it broke. There you go. This surface is a little extended so that the bolt impacts there rather than impacting on this little tiny lug. And the idea was, instead of going solid like this one is, where the bolt kind of, like I said before, kind of acts as one piece, the idea was just to let this do whatever so that the bolt could go all the way forward and the carrier could go all the way forward like a normal AKM, which would mean your auto sear trip stays in the same spot. And all of this looks like a normal AKM rather than having to have the gap there where this stays further back and then close the gap. So that was the idea. What actually happens, so I'll probably put some footage here, is that upon firing, this is in this position where the bolt is closed. Upon firing, the round, you know, hits this, accelerates them together, and then the bolt lags a little, where the bolt drags forward under its own weight, which I was hoping the bolt would drag forward, you know, eject because the carrier is otherwise in the way, and cycle. What actually happens is it lags forward a little, and then the carrier lags, and it kind of just does that. Kind of just gyrates back and forth like that as it cycles. So what I tried to fix that is I cut a notch in the bottom of the carrier here, and where'd it go? I cut a corresponding notch in the hammer. So the hopes was that this would hit, you know, it would cycle, and the hammer would hit this notch and kick the bolt forward for me, which kind of worked. It made it eject better, but what it really did is, hopefully you can see it in the slow-mo, this would fire, this would hit so hard that the hammer would just accelerate off into space. This would do its thing with the bolt too far back, and then while it was too late, already past the ejector, then this would hit and delay the bolt back forward. You might be thinking, like, that sounds really stupid. Why would you even try that in the first place? Like, why not just do that? Well, I thought it would be cool and super easy because those bolt mods took me maybe an hour. Because I had prior work that showed it worked. This is something that hasn't been shown off yet, but this is a AK in 7.62x39 that is direct blowback. There is no locking system in this whatsoever. Because this has a live hammer in it, I'm not going to chamber the round in the shot, but if you chamber it, the bullet tip sticks out of there. I'll probably put in some footage here of it shooting. But long story short, I made this out of, again, entirely broken parts for fun to see if it would work. Oop, this part's stuck. Okay, hammered it out. Good old percussive maintenance. I first had that idea for this gun. It is the exact same setup, just a notch cut in there. Doesn't go quite as far back, but just a notch cut in there. And on this, it works great. It ejects every single time. It has some other issues because it doesn't have a top cover. This tilts really bad. It needs a lot of work to get it running. And before you ask, this is not an SBR. This stock is permanently affixed. It's for aesthetics only. And this worked, which is why I wasted time thinking that the one in the Takorev would work. So it doesn't. I forgot to mention, I also turned down this and added a spring in here and welded a washer at the back so that the bolt would be spring-loaded forward, which also basically did nothing because this has so much energy when it fires that it still does that thing where the carrier just lags behind. The spring cannot overcome it. The problem is you can't use a super strong spring either because the recoil spring has to overpower it when this hits the chamber and tries to, close the gun. This spring can't be stronger than the recoil spring or the gun is just held open. So all in all, complete failure of a design, but I learned, it doesn't work. Well, if you suffered through all that, first off, thanks for sticking around. Second off, I'll show you a cool little thing that didn't make the final cut in the video. I have this recoil buffer travel limiter thing. So what this does is it just limits how far the bolt carrier can go. And it stops it just a little bit past where this has to go to pick up a new round out of the magazine. So what this does, what it was intended to do, is increase the rate of fire. And it does so dramatically. Go! So why this didn't make the final cut is that ejection on this is still not great because the ammo we're using is kind of garbage, and I'll get to that in a minute. But basically, because this cycles so incredibly fast now, sometimes the casings are not out of the way before the bolt carrier comes back, and it'll stovepipe where it just pinches a spent case back in there. The reason the PPSH can have a faster rate of fire and get away with it is it has much less in the way of the bolt. Once the casing is out of the top of the gun, there's not a whole lot of stuff to catch it. They do have problems occasionally, but it doesn't have nearly as much distance to travel as this does to get a casing out of the way. Okay, so I mentioned garbage ammo. This is surplus Polish ammo, I believe, from the 1960s. It is brass case, but it is very poor quality brass case. You can see these necks are split out of the box. I think just from stress in the metal from working it and then sitting in a box for, how many years is that? 60 years-ish? The casings have split because they use these little dimples you can probably see around the neck there. Instead of a crimp, they use these little dimples to hold the bullet in. It just creates stress and cracks. So these do fire safely. You know, it doesn't leak gas past it or anything, or at least not noticeably. But what it does do is that bullet is not held in the case securely. So when it feeds, you know, you have your your feed ramp, and this comes up something like that, and it's kind of trying to do that number to get in the case, or excuse me, get in the chamber. It does take a good bit of force to do that, you know, not a lot, but when these are not held very well, they do that. You can see that thing is smushed in there, and this causes misfeeds. I would like to get some good ammo for this and try it, but I honestly don't really care that much. We'll see. It kind of bothers me. Another side effect of this garbage ammo that you can see in the video is the rate of fire is extremely inconsistent. It's actually kind of fun to shoot because it is just all over the place. Throughout the magazine, the rate of fire just goes up and down and all sorts of stuff. I'll put in a clip here from Brandon's video, but you can see in slow motion of the bolt carrier that with one round, get that out of there, with one round, it'll cycle all the way back and bottom out. You know, pick up, fire the next round, and with the next round, it'll cycle, you know, to like there and pick it up, and then the next one's back there. It's just all over the place. Just extremely poor ammunition. It was probably okay when it was made, but, you know, let powder, you know, chemicals sit for 60 years. You know, Soviet quality in the first place. It's not the best. There you have it. A pretty in-depth breakdown of the affectionately called Kami Tommy. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments. I'm sure I missed something, even though this video was very long and rambling. To answer the question you're going to ask, no, I'm not going to make you one. No, I'm not going to sell them. Far too much work, far too untested. Just a nightmare in general, so please don't ask. It was funny the first 2 times. I've received so many DMs asking about it. It's not funny anymore. Please don't ask. So thank you for sticking around till the end. If you want to see breakdowns on any other stuff me and the team here have built, let me know. I'll keep doing them as long as I have motivation or until YouTube bans me. So just let me know what you want to see.